The problem that I would like to specifically address is that all of you must be studying science in school in various subjects you have been studying, and often students get the idea that science is essentially collection of these subjects: physics, chemistry, biology, uh, mathematics, and all together is science. Let me first tell you that science is not that. Science is not a collection of subjects. Then you might say that in uh, physics, I have learnt about Newton's laws. We have learnt that there are pressure of air. We have learnt that why the sky is blue. All these things then comprise science. Effectively, you are telling me that a set of informations is science. No, that's also not science. These are all products of science, but these by themselves are not science. Then what actually is science? Science is a different way of thinking. It is quite different from the way we learn to think by going through school and college. Essentially, what does the school do? At least, what is it supposed to do? It is supposed to teach us not only subjects, not only information, not only techniques, but it is supposed to teach us how to think. And after you complete school and college, you will be facing the rest of the world. You will no longer be under the tutelage of your parents. You have to take the decisions, day-to-day decisions of your own life. And that is when you have to think on your own. And the purpose of the whole education is essentially to equip you, to train you in the art of thinking. And in order to think properly, that has to be backed up by certain information. And that is also a part of training. These are the information that, for example, through the whole course of human history spans about 40,000 years. Over these 40,000 years, people have tried to learn about nature, how various things in nature work. Why does the sun appears to go around from the east to the west? Why does the moon also appears to go from the east to the west? If you look at the night sky, the whole sky seems to go from east to the west. Why does it happen that way? Why is the sky blue? Why is the leaf green? So these are the natural questions that came to people's mind, and people tried to find out the answer to these questions. And over the 40,000 years of human history, all the answers that we have found are conveyed to you in a short span of time. These actually form the basis on which you think, but this itself is not the thinking. Without this information, you will not be able to think properly. That is why this information is provided, but that itself is not the thinking. So what is the thinking process that science teaches us? Most importantly, when we have a question in mind, that should be the first thing that we have to learn, that science is essentially our way of answering questions. We have questions, naturally we have questions. There are various questions that I just enumerated a few, but you can have more such questions in your mind. So when you have questions, that is the starting point in doing science. But any question does not become a scientific question. In order to become a scientific question, it has to satisfy certain criteria. What criteria? Firstly, it should be answerable in a well-defined process, following a well-defined method. And therefore, any question that is too broad too vague, these are not scientific questions. For example, what is the meaning of life? That is not a scientific question. Where did everything come from? That is not a scientific question. Secondly, a question has to be based on what we already know. If you do not know what is already known by mankind and you still have a question, the best thing to do is to find out what is already known. So that is also not the basis of a scientific question. And thirdly, and most importantly, is that science bases itself on the belief that in this material world there is nothing but matter. Everything is matter. And therefore, every question that you formulate is related to properties and phenomena of matter. Therefore, we do not question about the properties of ghosts, for example, because that is not a material entity. So actually, there is no evidence that they exist. So we always formulate questions regarding material processes and phenomena. So when you have such questions in mind, then what will be the process of answering the question? The process of answering the question in the ancient times was everybody thought about the answer individually and they would come to their own answers. My question, my answer. And naturally, for every question, different people arrived at different answers. And therefore, there would be contradictions, there would be debates, there would be discussions, and people would say that, okay, a single question has plural answers, many answers. You will believe whatever you like to believe. Modern science says no. Every question has one single correct answer. And it is our task to find that single correct answer. How can we find that? That is the main crux of science. Science actually is a way of thinking in which there is a method. We always follow a method. Now, in that method, whenever we have a question, we always initially guess about the answers. The guess should not be a wild guess. It should be based, it has to be a basis. And the basis normally is that we try to figure out, we try to find out what is known about that particular phenomenon, what are the observations. And on that basis, we make our guesses. Now, when the guesses are based on certain observations, these observations can be taken as clue, then these are called hypotheses. So we form hypotheses. Let me give you an example. A natural question is, how did the solar system form? How did the solar system come into existence? A natural question. Now, in order to answer that question, you have to form certain educated scientific guesses, hypotheses. And initially, people tried to make those guesses on the basis of certain observations that were already there. For example, we see the earth going, or not, we don't see, but actually Copernicus' idea was there that the earth goes around the sun and the other planets also go around the sun. That's fine. But then it is possible that earth goes around the sun in one plane, Mars goes in another plane, Jupiter goes in the third plane, and so on and so forth. You see a mental picture of an atom where different electrons are going around in different planes. That kind of picture is possible? No, it is not factually correct. The solar system was found to be practically flat, which means all the planets move in one plane, almost one plane. How did we find that? If you look at the night sky, you will find that all the planets are moving along a very narrow strip. This is called the zodiacal strip. And the reason that we do not find planets in any part of the sky, you find planets only along that particular strip. That is the basis of the understanding that the solar system is practically flat. So that formed a basis for the guess, for the hypothesis. We know that different planets have different distances. That formed a basis of the hypothesis. We know that all the planets move in the same direction. That was another clue. So on these basis of these clues, people made the initial hypothesis. So when we make any hypothesis, these are not wild guesses, these are not fanciful thinking, these are all based on certain observations. Then what do we do? So long as the number of clues are small, we will not be able to arrive at a correct guess. What we will find? We will find that many different guesses would be able to satisfy the clues. And in that case, what do? We propose as many hypotheses as possible, each satisfying the clue. So we propose a large number of hypotheses, each one satisfying the clue, and then comes the most crucial step. The crucial step is that each hypothesis has to be tested. And if each hypothesis has to be tested, then primary condition is that each hypothesis has to be in principle testable. And what do you mean in principle testable? That in principle it is possible to conceive an experiment or an observation whose outcome may contradict the expectation from the hypothesis. If it contradicts, my hypothesis is false. At least the theoretical possibility of my hypothesis that it can be proved wrong by an observation, that is one hallmark of science. Every time we propose a hypothesis, then we make sure that it is in principle what is known as falsifiable. So this is a hallmark of science. It should be in principle falsifiable. And then scientists try to work out, if this hypothesis is true, what should be the experimentally or observationally testable prediction from that hypothesis, and then they go out and actually perform the experiment or the observation. And through that we come to a understanding as to we actually reject the wrong hypothesis. Ultimately, suppose there were 6 hypotheses initially to start with to answer a particular question, we eliminate 5 of them, and then we home on to one and say that now it is my theory. So what is then the basis of the whole thinking is that I will make, whenever faced a question, I will make a scientific guess. A scientific guess is always based on certain facts and figures. And then I will test. Only when my hypothesis, my guess passes the test, I will say I have reasons to believe. Therefore, one hallmark of science is that we never believe anything without evidence. Evidence is the primary demand of science. Anybody says something, anybody believes in something, opinions, nothing matters in science unless it is backed up by evidence. Now, let me give a specific example. As you know, now it is the time of the coronavirus. And the whole scientific world is working, trying to find out a cure of the corona problem. If somebody is affected by the coronavirus, how to cure him or her, how to produce some kind of a substance which when administered will prevent a person from contacting coronavirus. Doing that, just consider the situation where the Ayush ministry has given some advisories of taking certain Ayurvedic drugs, Unani drugs, homeopathic drugs which are said to be boosting our immunity. The question is, if somebody is proposing a new medicine, somebody is proposing a new vaccine, or somebody is proposing a new immunity boosting drug, what can be the evidence for it? First thing is that people should demand evidence that it really works. And how does science find out the evidence? Let me illustrate that by talking about how a drug can be proved to be a drug. It's not that somebody is sick, you apply the drug, the guy gets cured, and therefore you say that it's drug. No, that doesn't work, because the person could get cured by her own immunity. That's not a proof that the drug really cured him or her. So the way to do it is that we collect a large number of people affected by the same disease, COVID, and then say 100 people, then divide them into two parts, 50-50 maybe, and then on one set we apply the drug, and another set we do not apply the drug. And then after some time we find out by actually taking the swabs and finding out whether that contains the virus or not, how many of them have got cured. That also will not work, because the person who is doing the test, if he or she believes that that is a drug, then he or she might do some error in the measurement. So the person who actually does the measurement does not know whether a particular sample has come from somebody from this group or that group. The group on which the drug is administered is called the experimental group. The group on which the drug is not administered is called the control group. So the person actually doing the test would not know whether a particular sample is from the experimental group or a control group. That also does not suffice. The person who is affected by the virus, he or she, if he knows that no drug is being administered, he might be psychologically weaker, and that might affect the health. And so on the control group, something is given that looks and feels like the drug but is not the drug. And finally, after having done the test, you collect the samples, you obtain the numbers, and upon statistical analysis, if that shows that there is a large confidence with which we can say that the proposed drug is really a drug, then we say, yes, it has passed the test. And it is because that we have to go through this process that drug discovery takes such a long time. It's not that I believe in a particular thing will be a cure, and therefore we start applying it. That doesn't work in scientific community. So whenever we have a question in mind, we propose many possible hypotheses, and then each one is tested that way, and then we reject the wrong hypothesis, and finally we arrive at the one that is correct. This is how science works. Science works by proposing hypotheses to explain things. And the moment we arrive at the answer also points to many other questions. And therefore, one answer leads to another question, that answer leads to another question, therefore the questions never end. We keep on asking questions, ultimately leads to a body of knowledge. That body of knowledge itself is not science. That is taught in your school and colleges, but that itself is not science. Then what is science? Science is the way the body of knowledge is built. It is a way of thinking. A way of thinking in which nothing is believed a priori. It's a way of thinking in which there is no guru. A guru type thinking essentially has the underlying belief that whatever the guru says is right. Whatever Newton says is right. Whatever Einstein says is right. No. In science, everything that Newton said had to be tested, and then only people accepted. everything that Einstein said had to be tested, and then only people accepted. Even if that test takes 100 years still. For example, Einstein proposed that there would be something called gravitational wave. It took 100 years to prove its existence, but still people tried. Only when it is finally tested to be true, people said, yes, on this, what Einstein said is true. Not because he is a great scientist, not because we believe him to be true, but we have tested him to be true. And did everything that Newton said come out to be true? No. For example, his law of gravitation is successful in most places. You can throw a stone, you can calculate how far it will go, you can then measure whether it went to that distance or not. You'll find that it is correct. You can actually apply his method to find out, if I measure the Mars to be at this particular point now, where will it be 1 month later? You can calculate using Newton's laws, and you will find that Mars is there. But in the motion of the Mercury, people found that every planet's motion is an ellipse, and in ellipse there is a major axis and a minor axis, and people found that the major axis shifts, rotates in a very slow pace, but it does rotate, and that could not be explained with Newton's laws. And then we knew that there's some problem with Newton's laws, and therefore testing, doubting, this is a hallmark of scientific thinking. We never believe anything to be true unless we have evidence for it. Okay. The method of science that I just talked about also has one very important aspect. That is, science believes in causality, which means that anything happens in this world has a cause. And that cause, finding the cause, is how much of science is built. An apple falls from the tree and falls down, not up. Why? What is the cause? In trying to find the cause, one can arrive at the theory of gravitation. We see the moon going from one place to another. Why? We see only one face of the moon, not the other. Why? What is the cause? So whenever we see something, whenever anything happens, science tells you that there must be a cause, and we have to find that cause. Most important thing is that when we try to find the cause, that cause we always try to find in material processes and phenomena. We never say that this happened. For example, how did the life come in the earth? The scientist who is trying to probe that question will start from the premise there must be a material process through which life has originated. He or she will never say that somebody willed it, somebody wanted it, somebody created it. No, that is not how science functions. So at the basis, we have the idea that there must be a cause, and that cause must be a material cause. So we now understand that initially there were all inanimate matter, and at some stage the earth was very inhospitable place, not like the present earth. At that time the temperature was high. There was sea, but hot water in the sea. The atmosphere was primarily composed of carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, and things like that, water vapor. And then at some time there were lightnings and things like that. So people created an atmosphere like that in a laboratory, made lightning, and then they found that through that some bigger molecules, amino acids, are forming. So people knew that in that primordial atmosphere, amino acids must have formed, bigger molecules must have formed. And then by reacting those bigger molecules, people found that they try to form into even bigger molecules. They try to form chains of smaller molecules, forming bigger molecules. And then we understood that, okay, this is a process in which it is possible to at least form something like a replicating molecule, that molecule that can replicate itself. So see, how did we find that? We found that because of the primary belief that there must be a cause, and that cause must be a material cause. This is a very important hallmark of scientific thinking. Okay, has any questions accumulated by now?
Questions are actually specific questions.
Yes.
Uh,
See,
okay,
questions of the type of what is a wormhole, I'll not
Yeah.
take today. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it needs to be related to what is science and methodology of science, thinking process. It is better to have questions along that line. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, one question is from Isha Ghafoor. At present, we believe that everything obeys the law of gravitation as we have the proper evidences and theory. But there are few places that defies the law of gravitation. For example, the magnetic hill in Ladakh. Why is it so?
Actually, yeah. Actually, law of gravitation, at least on the surface of Earth, cannot be defied. Therefore, if you see a situation where your car apparently goes upwards, you have to find out why is it doing so. Okay, why is it doing so? And your primary thinking process should be that gravity is something that is ubiquitous and that must be obeyed. So there must be some other reason for it. Now, what often happens is that our eyes perspective often fools us. What we believe to be going up is actually going down, because everything else is curved in such a way, everything else is sloped in such a way that when we try to figure something as downslope, it is in relative to whatever else we are seeing around us. Now, if whatever else is tilted in a different way, then what is actually downslope may also look like a upslope. Okay, so a good test will be to go there and to have what is known as the civil engineers normally use a particular device to figure out what is horizontal. So use that to figure out which one is the real slope. You will find that what is looking as the upslope is actually a downslope. And in California, there is an artificially constructed house I visited once. I mean, they charge money to go into it. It's a sort of sightseeing place. It's called a crazy house, gravity defying house, where if you stand, you will feel that you are standing in an inclined way, which you cannot, right? But you are standing normally, but you feel that you are standing in an inclined way. If you look in a mirror, it will look like you are standing in an inclined way. And why is that? Because the whole building is built in inclined way, so that when you are standing on the floor, you are standing truly vertical. But since the whole building is inclined, and therefore you feel that you are standing in an inclined way, it is our own perception that changes. There also it is something like that. Okay. Any other question?
Yeah, question is on
Okay.
gravitation. What is gravitational wave?
Universal
Question is, what is
gravity
universal law
is
of gravitation?
essentially the idea that everything attracts each other with a force equal to g m1 m2 by r square. It is universal in the sense that everything is subject to this law of gravitation. Everything. So two planets will attract each other, two stars will attract each other, two galaxies will attract each other, two atoms will also attract each other. But since there is a g m1 m2 by r square, if these are atoms, then m1 and m2 are so small, and in comparison to that, the distance between them is so large that the gravitational attraction is meaningless. But it's there. But if for a galaxy, for a star, for a planet, these are very much real entities. It is it is universal in that sense. Now this is Newton's theory. But we, as I told you, that at some stage we found that Newton's theory is not really a correct theory, because at least in the motion of Mercury, we found that there is something that cannot be explained with Newton's laws. And then Einstein came forward and proposed an alternative theory of gravitation. That's also universal gravitation. But the way gravity works, according to Einstein, is different. There is another point that Einstein noticed. Imagine that the sun is attracting the earth, and therefore the earth is going around it. Imagine, for the sake of argument, that suddenly at some point of time the sun disappears. What will happen? It's a thought experiment. Your thought experiment, according to Newton, will say immediately there will be no force acting on earth, and therefore earth will go on in a tangential way. It will go in a straight line path, right? But light travels from the sun to the earth in 8 minutes. So Einstein said that information cannot go from the sun to the earth, that the sun has disappeared, that cannot go before the 8 minutes. Earth will come to know about it only after 8 minutes. And therefore, the prediction of the Newton's theory will not be correct. And then Einstein actually provided a completely different description of gravity, in which the space-time itself has a curvature around a heavy body and any other body. So there will be space-time curvature around the sun, and the earth is moving in its natural course. It is trying to follow a straight line, and the straight line happens to be, in that curved space, happens to be its orbit. So that is a different kind of explanation. You will not understand this explanation at this stage. Maybe when you go to college, at some stage you will be able to understand it. But one important sort of prediction of Einstein's theory was that if you have something that is oscillating, then, for example, if you have an oscillating charge, it emits electromagnetic radiation. Similarly, if you have an oscillating mass, it will emit another kind of radiation. It will be a ripple in the space-time, and that will also travel at the same speed as the speed of light, and that is called the gravitational wave. And we have now actually detected gravitational wave, and that way we know that it is actually real. Any other question?
Yeah. There's a question from Meera Bharati SB. As we all know, this world is a combination of materials and materials that we perceive with our 5 sense organs. Whether there can be other world with combination of materials which human sense organs cannot perceive.
Well, I said that anything that science believes or science proposes must be in principle falsifiable. Okay. Now, suppose I make the proposition that there is an alternative world where the things are not perceptible through our senses. Is there any way to test that hypothesis? Is there any way to falsify the hypothesis? If not, then science will not give it sufficient importance, because it cannot test it. Anything that cannot be tested cannot be subject matter of study in science. And therefore, such ideas we would not really harbor, because in science it cannot be tested.
Yeah, a question from Sudin. What is the reason that science is based on belief of causality?
This is following what is known as inductive logic. Inductive logic is that one day you see cloud in the sky and then you see rain. Another day you see cloud in the sky, again you see rain. Third day you see cloud in the sky, again you see rain, and then you form a sort of mental connection. If there is cloud in the sky, it may rain, and therefore you take an umbrella with you. So what has happened is that we have seen some particular instance of an event, and then our mind has generalized it and saying that it always happens, and therefore there is a chance that it will rain. Every time there is darkness, it is followed by light. So you know that you have seen it every day happening, and therefore your mind has produced a generalization is that if now it is night, at some point later it will become day. This line of logic is called inductive logic, where we see in various phenomena certain things happening, and then we say that it always happens. The causality is like that, which means that we have seen wherever we have any question regarding how did it happen, why does it happen, this kind of questions, we tried to find a cause, and we did find a cause, in the sense that if you then make the cause to happen, the effect happens. And since it has been seen by millions of people millions of times without an exception ever, scientists have made a inductive conclusion that whenever anything happens, there must be a cause. And that has really reaped very rich dividend. Because we have this confidence, whenever something happens, we never say that somebody willed it. We always try to look for a cause, and we always find a cause. The whole of science has been built that way. Whenever somebody falls ill of malaria, we don't say that he did some sin in the last birth and therefore he has been afflicted by malaria. No, we try to find a material cause, because we know that every time in past history, anything that happened always had a material cause. Therefore, whenever this person is now has a fever, he's suffering, there must be a material cause for it. And then people tried to find and found that the malaria parasite is responsible. So it is basically by inductive logic that we have come to the idea of causality.
Yeah.
Any other question?
Yeah, question from Bhanumati VA. What is the difference between old science and modern science?
Essentially, old science is where what I was talking about in the beginning of my talk is that in the old times, whenever people had some question in mind, individuals will try to think about it. Individual will come to some conclusion, and for that person, the conclusion that he or she has arrived at, this would be his or her conclusion, the answer. And different people will have different answers. Some people will say, I believe in him, and therefore I'll believe whatever answer he gives, and so on and so forth. This process of thinking is called subjective thinking. And during the era of subjective thinking, there was no question of people looking for evidence. Nobody ever performed an experiment. Nobody ever tried to test whether a belief is correct or not. It is my belief. It is my understanding. I have thought about it and come to this conclusion. Me, subject. That was subjective thinking. Now, Galileo introduced the idea that what I'm thinking may be wrong. And therefore, it is my task to test it against physical reality. And when he actually tested most of his ideas by performing experiments, he was telling the rest of the world, look, I have this belief, all right, but I don't think that my belief necessarily has to be correct, and therefore I have to test it. This introduced a new way of thinking called objective thinking. Now, the main difference between the science of the ancient time and the science of modern time is that in ancient time, people's thinking process was subjective, and in the modern time, people's thinking process is objective. That is the main difference. Any question then?
Question from Lakshmi Sajish. Do you think most scientists are more susceptible to missing false positives or false negatives?
Good. This is a good question. Well, if somebody knows the method of science well, then he or she will be careful enough not to fall prey to what is known as confirmation bias. What is confirmation bias? Suppose I have some belief and then I am performing an experiment or observation, sort of trying to prove my belief. Then this is not the way science works, because I am starting with a belief and I am trying to prove my belief. And what happens often is that if I find some information at odds with my belief, I would either give less importance to it or ignore it or drop a data point from my data set. So these things actually happen. Scientists are also humans. It happens. And due to which, often what is actually false, sometimes we believe to be correct. And what is actually true, sometimes we believe to be not true. So this way things happen. So false positives and false negatives are essentially a result from what is known as confirmation bias. That is why in science, very elaborate methodology has been evolved, which allows us to avoid the false positives and false negatives. Any question?
Yeah. Next question is from Arvind. Yesterday's truth is not true today, and it may not be tomorrow. Why does this happen? So is the truth today a real truth? Will it change tomorrow?
Well, in science, the understanding is that truth is dependent on the condition. Suppose I am trying to talk about the truth about something, then the truth of that will be dependent on the condition of existence. To give a very simple example, if I ask you what is the truth about the state of matter of water, you say it is liquid. But the fact that it is liquid, it is dependent on the state of existence, its condition of existence. If the temperature is below 0 degree, it will no longer remain liquid, right? And that is true for everything. That means what is true depends on the condition of existence. Also, things may change with time because things evolve. Today's humans, a million years back, were not there. There were different organisms in existence which changed in course of time to give rise to today's humans. Therefore, all the things that humans do today made no sense in those times, right? So there was no psychology in those times. And imagine a situation where the life had not evolved on this planet. The whole planet was lifeless. The whole science of biology will make no sense, right? Imagine Earth has not formed. It is only the star, the sun. In the temperature inside the sun, no molecules can form. And therefore, the whole science of chemistry makes no sense. So the point is that if you say the truth, today's truth, will it change tomorrow? Yes, it can. In the sense that at some point of time, there was no life on Earth, and then life originated. The truth that was existing earlier no longer remain true now. And then at some point of time, through the process of evolution, humans emerged. The condition of the planet before that and the condition of planet after that, the things that are happening, these are entirely different. So new truths appear. the truths that were not there before. And for every particular thing, it depends on the condition of existence. Okay, therefore, truth, we say, is relative. Truth is relative in the sense that it is relative to the condition of existence. Okay. Next question.
Okay, I think, yeah, the question from Sri Chaitanya, they are said to exist in this universe, but there is no proof of its existence. I think existence of universe, I think.
Universe of
Yeah, the
no,
question is like this. They are said to exist in this universe, but there is no proof of its existence.
no, actually, the definition of the universe is that, I mean, in our small vicinity, for example, in Kerala, everything that is there in Kerala are Keralites. If you expand the horizon, everything that is there in India are Indians. If you expand your horizon, everything that is there on the earth are earthlings. If you expand your horizon further, everything that exists in the solar system are parts of the solar system. So solar system is defining as the collection of everything that is there in this region. Expand the horizon further, there is a galaxy. And everything that is there in the galaxy, including us, including all the billions of stars in the galaxy, put together is an entity called galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy. And similarly, there are billions of such galaxies. When you put everything that is there, that can be seen, not an imagination, that can be seen, that can be detected, that can be measured, all that put together, we call that as the universe. So everything that is under existence, if you put the whole superset of that, whatever you get is the universe. So it is not that the universe has to be seen. No. The fact that I am seeing you, I will say you are a part of the universe, and therefore the universe exists. I am seeing the sun exists, a part of the universe. That is how the universe is conceived. Okay. Next question.
No, other questions are actually related to specific field of science, like he's asking questions about dark matter.
Oh, no. Then let us drop these questions now.
Yeah, there are many questions like that. Number of questions are there. I think those questions can be taken up later. I feel so.
Yeah.
So if is there any
anyway,
other
it
questions?
Is past one hour.
Yeah. The questions again, like, are there other universe? There's a question.
We don't know. Other universe we don't know, because there is no way for us to reach there, probe that. If there is no way, then there is no way science can even prove that theory to be false, and therefore we don't even give a importance to that thing. So if there are other universes, we don't know. There can be, but we don't know.
Another question is there something that travels faster than light? And if that exists, then our entire whatever we are studying, everything will change. That's his question.
Well, theory of relativity says that nothing can be, you see, in order to accelerate something, you have to give energy to it, right? You take a ball and you want to accelerate it, you have to put energy into it. Theory of relativity says that you cannot accelerate something that is not at the speed of light to the speed of light. Because in order to do that, you will have to put in an infinite amount of energy. Since you cannot put an infinite amount of energy, therefore it is not possible to accelerate anything to the speed of light, and therefore it is not possible to go beyond the speed of light. It is like saying that the Himalayas is too tall a mountain, it's not possible to cross it. It is impossible to cross it, because in order to cross the Himalayas, you will have to, put in infinite amount of energy. Nobody has that amount of energy. But does that prove that there's nobody at the other side of Himalayas? Therefore, since all we can say is that it is not possible to accelerate anything beyond the speed of light, but that does not immediately prove that there is nothing with a speed that is greater than the speed of light. But we have not been able to detect any such thing. The possibility exists, but we don't know.
Okay, so there are a number of questions. Again, as I said, it is from specific field of science. This will be taken up later. Anyway, we are recording all your questions. I think we'll conclude this session here. I'd like to thank Professor Soumitra Banerjee for delivering this really enlightening lecture and explaining us the method of science and interacting with the students.